Alright, and
Yeah.
I'm live on
Um,
my end. Welcome to the Humane Mind episode 25. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the subjects that we've been covering in the past couple of weeks and getting more towards the root of the problem. So, this is something my brother pointed out to me after we did our gun debate issue is that the guns are part of the symptoms, they're not the root of the problem. And in the United States, we have a gang problem, we have a lack of fathers problem, we have a suicide problem, and we have an increase in psychosis problem. And those four things, you can see them materialize in all of these other issues that we're talking about on the show, and all like so, mass shootings and all that sort of thing. The insanity of what the left is doing as far as censorship, and even when you're talking about like the whole battle of the sexes thing that's kind of going
mhm.
on as recently as the Oscars speech. I don't know if you guys watched any of the Oscars or anything like that.
I avoided it
um,
because I watched
actually,
porn.
Aspie said it best. If he wanted to see a bunch of actors jerk each other off, he'd go to Pornhub. Anyway, yeah. So,
For the most part, it was
I've
okay, and I was
done
actually
gun
surprised.
control.
Yeah. So for the Oscars, for the most part, it was pretty tame, and nobody went out of their way, except for the actress of or the
I'm
best
gonna
female
watch.
actress or whatever. She went on all the women stand up and is like the that's what that I was hoping she was going to take it the other way and say all the women stand up who've been nominated for an award, because like half of the audience was standing up, and I was just like, yes, that's exactly the
No.
point. Is
Um,
Hollywood and Oscars or whatever haven't been like ignoring women. Half of the audience that was there was nominated being women for some kind of award in something, and you're just like,
there wasn't that many. There's only like 5 people that stood up.
oh, that stood up when she said that.
Yeah, and
Maybe,
for
maybe 10. I don't know.
No,
the
it
issue
was
of gun control.
there was more than that. That may have there may have
Okay,
only
on
been
the
5 to
issue of
10
gun
people who won.
on the issue of gun control.
Yeah,
180
Yeah,
degrees.
I know. I was
yeah,
gonna add
yeah.
something,
Well,
but
so there's
But
three
anyway,
topics that we want to
so
talk about, or at least
me and
that
Zach,
I thought we could kind of cover in a broader sense. So
yeah,
the Oscars thing, because of the whole when it's time for women and the whole Me Too movement, and for some reason women have been
yeah,
oppressed and
yeah.
that idea, the gun control
she got
issue.
her. She also had her. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So if
Um,
you guys want to elaborate on any one of those type of issues, oh,
I
Yeah,
do.
okay.
I wanted
But
to
yeah,
elaborate on the Oscars.
so,
I do.
okay,
She.
so
I'll let him.
I mean, on the issue of guns, yeah, on the issue of guns, me and Zach, we've done response videos to gun control apologists, and he keeps bringing up a statistic about the more gun ownership increases, gun violence decreases. I'm gonna see if I can
Yeah.
find his video and find that statistic, which, um,
Sure.
from how I've examined the source he provided, Zach's stat, at least from
I
how I
tried to
observed
find
it,
that
hold up.
source. I'm not good at finding.
You guys
Yeah,
have
just literally
ADD. You guys have ADD more than I do on my streams. Okay.
I'm just trying to actually talk about the subject at hand. I
Okay,
mean, the
yeah. So
Oscars,
let's
yeah,
talk about the gun issue, because this is something that we talked a lot about guns per se, but we didn't talk about the issue. And because anytime some kind of mass shooting happens, they always go, "Oh, we need to restrict guns," and then people are like, "Oh no, I need to defend my Second Amendment right." But that just creates a false dichotomy where it's left versus right. People who are pro-gun versus people who are anti-gun.
Yeah.
The issue at play here is how do we stop the mass shootings? And saying we're going to have so this is, I mean, even though I think that if you arm the population as a whole, that's going to provide a defense against mass shootings. That doesn't stop the mass shooting from happening in the first place. That's a
yeah,
Or it gives more
deterrent
crazy people more guns.
once somebody already is going to say is once already somebody's already made up in their mind that they're going to try to be a mass shooter or going to be a mass shooter.
They're gonna
That's
do
going
it
to be a
one way or
deterrent. Is
another.
I don't want to go to places where I'm gonna get off one round and then be shot. That's so shooters
yeah,
are gonna go for easy targets.
yeah,
So
and
having
something
everybody
else.
armed is a deterrent, but that person still has made up in their mind that they're going to kill people.
Yeah,
How do you resolve that problem? That's
yeah,
something.
and something else. When you and Ham were debating on flag protesting, one of you mentioned that ISIS or some terrorist groups over in the Middle East have weapons like anti-aircraft or anti-tank weapons, and AK-47s or what have you.
Yeah.
And they had some success of fending off the United
Well,
States military to some
for
degree.
10 plus years. 10 plus years. We're still embroiled in a war in that region. We didn't win anything.
Yeah,
we're deciding to give up on Afghanistan and just like cut our losses and just kind of walk away. We didn't win. Like we should, like Iraq or like the war against the country was over in days. And yet we still had a military presence there for 10 plus years because we were fighting the people there.
Yeah. And the point I'm to bring that up, because when I bring that up with gun control advocates, they totally miss the point. They're like, "But we're not. ISIS is not in the United States," and it's like, well, your extra chromosome has confirmed that you failed to see the point. But no, I mean, the reason I bring that up is we should have the same access to those type of weapons to fend off our own government to the best of our ability. When people say to me, "But it won't go tyrannical," well. That'll be the famous last words carved on their tombstone. But with the issue at hand, it's like a lot of these places that have the shootings are gun-free zones. And as Aircraft Sparky once said, a gun-free zone, once a gun enters the gun-free zone, that gun-free zone ceases to exist.
Yeah.
There's no way going around it. It's
like a bubble. All it takes is one poke, and hey, the whole thing is. Right.
I just provided a source in the group chat of the Twitter,
or like virginity, one prick and it's all gone.
Has provided.
Hey guys, I'm gonna bail out of this plane.
All right, you have fun. Make sure you have a parachute.
I don't know. I think I'd wish for. I wish. I don't. Never mind. Bye. Ah!
Well, my stomach's killing me today too. I gotta go.
All right, you have fun.
Right.
But Zach's video, it's called "Superwoman, Super Wrong on Guns." He provides several sources about gun crime dropping in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The Aurora Theater was a gun-free zone, and I think that, and I've brought this point up many times, and gun control advocates unwittingly concede this, is they say that we should ban these certain rifles like assault, like AR-15s, and the issue is they don't really define what an assault rifle is.
No, it's an ambiguous description.
Yes, and when you look at what they're when I bring up, okay, well, if the government bans it, who's to say that the black market is not going to sell that? You just created a demand.
Yeah.
And they'll say, then they're like, well, then we need to crack down on the black market, and I'm like, but does your gun control policy do anything about that? And
if we could crack down on the black market, you'd think we wouldn't have any drugs in the United States at all.
Basically, it's like prohibition of alcohol. And oh shit, your audio's like low. Let me raise your audio. Anyway, go ahead.
I have an argument. I think it could be easily refuted. Well, what do you say to people that say, well, we shouldn't ban anything, we shouldn't have any laws because like murder or something, or capital punishment because, well, you can just do it anyway. Like, what do you think to that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a total false analogy. I mean,
I know it's a false analogy.
I get what you're saying. Like, we tried to ban alcohol in the 1920s, and that was a spectacular fail. The war on drugs has been a spectacular fail. It's unconstitutional. It's killed probably more than it's tried to save, and the same could be said about these gun control laws. Is they're going to cause more harm than good, and
if they
that's my exact argument towards that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with that argument is you're comparing two separate types of activities, right? When someone
like apples and oranges.
Yeah. When someone murders, there is a victim of that murder, right?
Yeah.
There's a victim that was murdered. When someone buys a gun illegally, who's the victim?
Nobody.
Who was wronged? So when it comes to murder, society has to say, okay, we don't allow this particular activity, and if somebody does this, we are doing something we're doing something to catch the person who did it or to punish the person, so that we were trying to balance the scales. When someone buys a firearm, on the black market, what is done to balance that scale? What scale has been uneven that the justice system has to come in and try to balance?
That's
the issue.
I know I know. I want to say I know.
Yeah, and the thing with and I've seen various people talk about the gun control issue, and it's like these teenagers in Florida and in my state, because my school ended up on the news due to people protesting about the whole thing. Well, I commend them protesting, as that's their right to do so, and they're doing it because they want to stand up against gun violence. All their solutions, like whenever I talk to these people, I'll answer with an open mind. I'll say, all right, here's my issue with gun control. Please tell me about what you want to do to prevent more gun violence. And they'll say, ban these guns. And when the school shooting of Sandy Hook happened, a girl actually wrote to the president at the time, pleading with the president to find a way to ban anyone who's not a cop or in the military from having these guns. And because it was a relative of hers, it was a relative of hers who died in it. So I didn't call her any names. I wasn't like, oh, she's a moron. It was like, I can see why she said that.
Yeah.
However, it's obviously out of emotion and not. And the thing is, these people seem to be caving to what these teens want, and then like these angry teenagers who who are demanding these things. It feels like that they're not going to stand up to them at some point and say no, enough is enough. And I know people joke about it a lot, but I mean, my generation eats fucking Tide Pods. If they're supposed to be taken seriously on the issue of guns, my God.
And let's not say that these kids are being bribed by the teachers to do this shit.
Well, the other thing is they keep repeating the exact same talking points in almost the exact same order, like across the board. This is something I noticed. Yeah, something I noticed in the debate with Ham is I was treating his argument. I was like, he would bring forth arguments, I would refute them, or at least combat them, or at least provide a counter argument and all that sort of thing. And then I heard those exact same arguments, like almost word for word. Let's see, I think it was an interview on CNN or something like that. It was the exact same arguments in the exact same order and I was like, what's going on here? I thought I was dealing with someone who was thinking for themselves. I mean, that's my mistake for thinking Ham could do that, but
that was on auto repeat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you were basically it was almost as if you were saying, okay, repeat after me, Ham, and then you say something, he repeats it back to you verbatim. Basically, that was what you were dealing with.
That's the arguments they use when talking about guns. So the other thing, let's see, what was there's a more.
And you have
okay. That's what I was saying. That's why I was bringing that point up. Is they're repeating points made by other people and almost like verbatim, like parroting it back, and yet people are saying that those are the types of people we need to listen to. I'm like, wait, people who just hear and repeat? No, that's not the type of people you want to follow or listen to their advice. You're looking for people who think for themselves, who think critically, who analyze it and provide solutions, not people who follow the crowd. Yeah, Followers aren't leaders.
Not the monkey see, monkey do thing.
Yeah.
And
it's the blind leading the blind, right? That's
my thing is, now they're banning assault weapons. That includes the regular handgun because it's a weapon that does assault on somebody. There.
Yeah, and
it will lead to the
classified as that.
It will lead to all firearms being illegal. That's what it has to occur. Because this is something Ham mentioned and I didn't get to talk to because him and BTK were going at it at the point. But he said anything that improves your rate of fire. And I'm like, so one trigger pull, one bullet fires. So if I practice and I get better at shooting, I increase I'm increasing my firing capacity. Oh, that should be banned. If I get better at pulling the trigger, or if I maybe loosen a screw or oil my gun, right? Because okay, there's so much pressure. Okay, so the gun's getting stuck. All right, loosen it a little bit, or add more lubrication or whatever, so that way it pulls easier. Oh, I just modified my gun and I made it easier. I can now shoot faster. That's illegal.
There's also been cases where
lubrication, pulling, stroking, lubrication. What the fuck did I just walk into?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about
yeah.
You're in our.
We're talking about substitutes for phalluses. That's.
Yes.
And look at Japan. They have guns are illegal in there, and the rate of stabbings went up.
Oh yeah. Basically, people will get more creative with their killings. Instead of using a handgun, they will use their forks and their spoons.
And so I think we've covered the gun issue, or at least a lot. But the thing have any of you seen Mindhunters on Netflix or the documentaries that it's based off of? Or
I
have
watched
you,
like
is
2
any of you
episodes when you
familiar?
told me about it.
I have not had the chance
Yeah.
to do so.
So I highly recommend the show. I mean, it's a little dry in the first few episodes, but once they actually start getting into it, and the amazing thing is most of the lines or most of the dialogue in the show is taken directly from their interviews with the guys, and they've got comparison videos of the actual serial killers being interviewed, and then the clips from the show where it's the guy actors portraying them, and I was like, oh man, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah. So
it
the
does a really good
definition-
job of summarizing the detailed analysis of the psychotic mind.
Yeah, the definition of assault rifles is a rapid-fire, magazine-fed automatic rifle designed for infantry use. But then again, there's several, so it really depends on the definition you're going off of. But essentially, with the issue is people bring up Australia. They say, "Oh, Australia, they're the heroes of gun control and things like that." Which then you look at the cities of New York and Chicago, or at least Chicago. And you see how well that works. It's like with people when they talk about immigration, and you just look at Sweden and other countries, and it's a total shit show.
You guys just need to be more civilized. I mean, this is what this solution is, right? Like 4 p.m., it should be tea time. Like they do in England, like 4 p.m. And don't drink out of your those big chip mugs. That's just so primitive.
No. So the tea time thing is kind of gay, but the idea that you're hinting at is we need a more civilized society.
You need to bring back some culture, bring back some civilization.
It is a culture.
Have your little cucumber sandwiches, on the side, and they're very refreshing, and drink out of little saucers.
No,
and,
that sounds hella gay, dude. I mean, you have fun with that, but that's.
I never thought I'd live to see the day where someone in one of my streams, or just in general, said "hella."
Yeah, that's what I said.
I mean, I guess that's the '80s, child of the '80s coming out.
That's what I'm saying to Owen McDonald. I'm saying to Owen, please, make a YouTube tutorial on how to make and prepare tea properly like an English person, and spread it to America and get them on
Oh
board.
my god! The funny thing is, I know how to make.
No, I'm pretty sure we fought a war over not having to make tea, right? That's what the Boston Tea Party was about. I'm pretty sure that was the primary reason we went to war with England. It was like, no, we don't want to drink your tea anymore. We're drinking coffee like real men, and we threw their tea in the
Personally, I think when we have a stream with Owen in it, we should take a good 10 minutes and just have a drink and just chit chat like normal human beings. Have our own.
Basically, I'd also just drink some tea or just some Coke and pretend it's tea, and then we just put on funny British accents until he tells us to go fuck ourselves.
Capitalism.
Capitalism.
Hey! We can always spill the tea.
Yeah, humane.
I mean, because the British, already boss you around anyway. You got all these British people who make reality TV shows. They visit America and tell you what to do. You got the super nanny, going into your houses and telling you how to raise your kids. And the next step is the English, they make those sort of reality shows. They're gonna teach you how to wipe your ass. They're gonna watch you put a camera in your in your bathroom, and then they're gonna say, you're doing it wrong.
Like Super Nanny, aka the Mary Poppins Incorporation.
Yeah, the Mary Poppins of wiping your ass. It's
oh god.
I used to watch that show a lot.
Look, you're not doing it properly. You're just, you're pulling about 10 squares out. You're shoving it up your bum. Cut out 2 tiny little squares and just wipe gently.
Wait, you shove it up your bum? Have I been wiping wrong for years? that seems I don't.
That was a shitty thing for you to do.
No, that's not how you use a bidet.
Yeah, and then she's going to look at you, and then she comes into your house and looks at your ass, and then says, you really need to you got too much hair down there. You need to have a wax so that you don't get stuck on your bum.
What's a bidet? Are you talking about the drinking fountains they put in some bathrooms?
They don't call it an ass. They call it the bum. Look at your bum. Bloody hell.
Well, we call it we don't call because that's why cunt isn't offensive in Australia because we call it a fanny.
Funny.
That's
A
funny.
fa-
You call it.
No, a
I call
fanny.
people cunts. I call people cunts, so you know.
Yeah, but we use the word fat like the word fanny is for vagina, whereas you use the word for bottom. So when
I
you
use
say the
Cthulhu.
word like the word yeah no the word fanny pack like when you say fanny pack in Australia like everyone bursts out laughing because it's got a dirty meaning because they refer to the badge.
Yes.
Okay,
Um,
I'll remember
Package
that.
for a small result.
Yes. And in my state, when we call it the Sahara Desert or the Great Salt Lake, whatever you want to call it. I call it either one, but depends on which.
In Philly, we call it a coochie.
Yep. But yeah. So
or you could call it the Sarlacc pit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember you told me, Lonely Wolf, that if Hillary Clinton would have been inaugurated, all the Republicans would have fallen into her Sarlacc pit.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm gonna
Okay.
do? I'm gonna do a DSP gaming video,
Okay.
and I'm gonna hire someone on what is it called? Okay, I guess I'll talk about it in a minute. When I can.
Yeah. When you can think about it, when you can remember.
Alright.
But yeah. Something about So did you and Ham discuss the Australia talking point?
Yeah, we did, and we got to the like I mentioned that Australia doesn't have their gun buyback or ban system anymore. They abandoned it.
Yeah, they did. They did quite a while ago, and yeah, and the backstory behind the whole issue in Australia was there was a mass shooting and 35 people died, and in Australia their sentencing laws is different compared to ours in the United States. There's no
Hey,
capital
I'm back.
punishment.
You're comparing an apple and an orange. It's like it's like the super nanny going into one house and saying, okay, this technique is going to work. We're going to use a naughty step for this household. And that kid will respond.
Oh, God.
And then you go visit the other household, and like that method is not going to work. So she has to use another method, and it's kind of hard because it's very because I can't really judge. I try not to be too harsh in America because I don't know what it's like to live where you're kind of in kind of a state of heightened awareness when you know that a lot of people around you have guns and you're thinking, holy shit, like it doesn't seem safe.
If you
Not
ever,
really. I don't think that at all.
Me neither.
If you ever decide to live in America, I suggest go to Lancaster. You won't be bothered at all.
Basically,
Okay.
yeah, with guns, it's like, when people are like all afraid and everything, like I just tell people that when the Orlando shooting happened, when all these terrorist attacks happened, it's like we can let those people scare us and we can let them win, or we can just go through our lives to the best of our ability and try and put it behind us. But I do agree with people that there needs to be something done, but it's just I'm not convinced that restricting these guns, which basically you can put this piece of paper that says you can't have this type of gun, but all they have to do is do like, I don't know, 5 minutes on the deep web or something, and they can get themselves that AR-15 they wanted for their 18th
Yeah,
birthday.
they just have
the
to.
problem
They
is-
just have to make it around the cannibalism and child porn, and they can find their guns.
And the free
Well,
drugs.
the problem
Yeah,
is
true,
if they
that
really want to
too.
help, people with the gun problem, they would have to go after the gangs and the black market.
Yeah, but I know
here's
how to
the
do
thing: when it
that.
comes to the black market, really powerful people are regulars of the deep web and all the black market and all that. So you'd be getting in their way and messing with their money. So it'd be
Yeah.
kind of a
Well,
really
I reckon
difficult thing to do.
I reckon the
However-
teddy bear.
I remember from earlier what I wanted to say.
And you're
If I
getting,
can.
and you're getting rid of
And
little
I'm,
boys.
Okay.
Just type it in the
Are
chat.
done.
Yeah, all right,
Just type in the
Josh,
chat.
Josh, just say something. Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
just say it.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say if
Oh,
somebody
come on,
has
let
to
Josh,
throw away,
dude,
sorry,
man, let Josh man talk.
sorry, go.
You can go
Sorry.
next.
All right. I want to hire someone for my DSP gaming video, not to show the actual master. I just want to show it from like the camera, like showing his chest. I want to hire someone to and then look confused as they look at the camera, like, oh, it's on. And then hire them for
I know
20
what you're talking about. It's weird
for
and
my
unrelated.
DSP
But
gaming rant video.
What?
yeah, but yeah.
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Yeah.
No, I didn't, but like it related to earlier when I was talking about it in intro for something. But yeah, I
Yeah,
understand.
but okay. So as you were saying,
All right, Hunter, what were you trying to say?
Only wolf.
I forgot what I was going to say, but with the deep web, if somebody has the Tor web browser on their computer, you're going to bet that they're doing something illegal, because the Tor web browser. That's all. What else is there on the deep web that's of interest to people that you can find on the internet? I mean, is there anything anything legal that you just cannot find on the regular web? Regular.
I could give one.
What?
Okay. So
Satan worshiping recruitment.
Oh, what I do?
you can get that on the regular. There's no that's not illegal or something that needs to be done on the deep web. You could
Yeah,
easily
unless
do
they're
that.
murdering people.
What? Yeah, if they're like human sacrifice or anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, a lot of times, satanic people, like real satanic people, one part of the religion is that if you have kids, you abuse your kids.
Holy shit!
Not really.
Like that's the actual.
That's the real Satan worshippers.
No,
Those are not like
not the people who are Satan worshippers,
Those are
like
the small
goths
minority.
or like I mean they're the goths with a religion.
They're the really
basically.
edgy people.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
The people who are unique, just like everybody else.
To be honest,
yeah.
Okay, there's
To be honest, most Gothic people do not. They don't. Not all of them practice Satan worship. Most of them practice Wicca.
no. I'm saying they are in the they're basically doing it to fit into a group.
Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah. That it's the same mentality of being a goth is so you can be unique just like everybody else. That's
Oh yeah.
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 But okay, so Lonely Wolf mentioned something a little earlier, and I want to kind of jump on that because he was talking about the super nanny. I don't know why that was the analogy used about. It's not always the same for every household. There's no one solution for everything, and yet that
True.
seems to be people on the left. That seems to be their we just do this one thing and that fixes all these problems. We just ban guns and then that fixes all these problems. When it's the one solution. For everything.
Yeah,
mentality.
the left are more Nazis because they want the final solution for everything.
Yeah. There's someone there's a certain type of person that wants to prevent people from having certain civil liberties or being able to own certain things, and I think aren't they called fascists?
Oh
Capitalism.
my gosh, she is old.
Yeah.
Well,
If
the
you
thing
do
is-
this, that solves the problem.
Well, the thing is that there is no one way to solve the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
But if you take away, if there was no such things as guns, there'd be no such things as shooting crimes because, nobody would be able to shoot anything. But the thing is this: if they were to hypothetically take away all machine guns, nobody could have a machine gun. What's the chances that the Parkland shooter would have probably just used another type of means of killing people? Like you probably would have been. I would have if I was Marco Rubio up there on that stage, and that kid said, looking at you is the same as looking down the barrel of an AR-15. I would have looked at him and just said, yeah, I'm sorry that you went through that, but don't say that. And also, here's a question: three options. Would you have rather had your throat slit? Would you have rather had a pipe bomb thrown in your face? Or would you have rather been run over by a truck of peace, as they do in Europe? Pick one. Because one of those other things...
Islam.
Well, that's the
religion
other thing
pieces.
is the Parkland shooter had a grenade. I don't know if that was a actual an explosive grenade or if it was just maybe a smoke grenade or something like that. But it's listed everywhere I've seen. I've tried to find this out. Everywhere I've seen it says a grenade. It doesn't mention what type of grenade. It could be a flashbang. I don't know.
It was a
But
smash.
if it says grenade, in my mind, that's okay, that's an explosive device that the shooter chose not to use as opposed to a firearm. Now, had he had a grenade and no firearms, grenades.
Or
Bombs
would-
away.
the other thing he said, and the other thing that you brought up that should have been brought up. Or would you like to have your face burned off by an accelerating torch?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
The acid
overall
tanks
with the
Or a truck apiece.
True. Allah Akbar! Yeah.
Islam, the religion of pieces.
Smash you the pieces. Anyway,
I always,
That's what they do to kids.
I have something funny.
Say it, Patrick.
If a Muslim has explosive diarrhea when they're on the toilet, do they yell Allah Akbar?
Maybe.
God, we're so fucked. But
Copyright community guideline strike.
There it is.
Whatever.
JJ actually got one today. He actually got a community.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I referenced it.
Yeah.
And I got a 30-year. I got a not a 30-year, 30-day Facebook jail.
I doubt
Yep.
that
He
Danny
can't even get conjugal visits from his senpai, Judge Judy. I mean, that must be torture, right, Lily Wolf?
I know. You have to be in Facebook jail with Jared Fogle. Just don't drop the teriyaki sauce.
I wonder if in 50 years when he finally gets out of there, because he couldn't pay after doing, that finally goes to jail for 50 years and comes back and it's like, you're not allowed here, sir.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I don't know if Subway will exist that long. It might. You never know. But also,
Yeah.
I'd like
I
to
actually like Subway.
Yeah,
I would
Jared Fogle always likes the fresh meat in between his buns.
Yeah,
You like him a little too fresh.
yeah, a little too fresh. Also, Jared Fogle, he might be in prison, but he's still getting a foot long every single day.
Getting a foot long in isolation.
He's good in
True.
the neighborhood.
No, we wish he would be getting a foot long, but he's gonna be stuck in isolation for God knows how long,
Yeah,
away from everyone. Because the fucking system likes to protect pedophiles, which I personally think we should just execute them. But
We used to actually do that. We actually used to execute them, but the Supreme Court cut itself and said that's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which
How?
Oh,
That's what I don't
Whee!
understand. It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's like, well, does the punishment fit the crime? Yeah, but and like, well, then it's not cruel and unusual, is it?
Yeah.
yeah, even President Obama was pissed about that. Like, and I couldn't blame him. He wasn't even the president, but he was still pissed about it. He was like saying it was bullshit. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. He slammed it, and basically
Probably said that.
we've had
another word.
yeah.
Oh, that's
me
what
and
you said.
Yeah, me and HUMANE have had a chat on capital punishment. I think it was a rather interesting one, and then Mjolnir Man joined and his friend, and that was a shit show and a half. But
That's interesting. But yeah, I'm against
Yeah,
the capital
and,
punishment because if we get it wrong, we can't rectify that situation. If we imprison someone for a long time, there are things we can do to try to make amends. If we kill somebody by accident, like, oh, whoops, our bad, guys.
yeah,
We can't run president because you might we can't have a presidency because someone might get impeached.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? There's a bit of a false analogy. We've had presidents who've been impeached or risked impeachment, like Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon. But the idea is, what HUMANE's saying is, capital punishment, he doesn't like it in practice because we have gotten it wrong in the past, and we risk getting it wrong all the time. If you want capital punishment to exist, you have to, and this is not an ifs, ands, or buts. You have to make some accommodations on the process of the appeals and all those other things in order to make capital punishment work. But at this rate, with its decreasing approval rating, I don't think capital punishment will really exist in maybe a few decades in the United States.
It's going to get very expensive because what do you think is cheaper? What do you think is cheap? Yeah, what do you think is cheaper? A 30, or you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna do like, it's too expensive. They're gonna do like they do in Norway. If you go to jail for life, you don't actually go to jail for life. You go for 20 years and they let you out. And also I heard that there's this story of this this guy called Vines Verknes, who was a drummer for the band Mayhem. Or Burzum, I think it was Burzum, a black metal band, and these black metal bands are like the most evil. These are actual satanic metalheads. These are satanic. These are the true Satanists in the metal community. And this band killed another really evil band member called Euronymous or something. I forgot his name. Euronymous, yeah, Euronymous, and he
was killed for having a shitty name.
Yeah, and he killed him, and he got 20. He was put in jail for life, but he got out in like just a few hours because they only kept him in for 20 years. That's the max sentence, is 20 years. And he actually
Yeah, me and HUMANE, we kind of, yeah.
He actually smiled when they announced his verdict, which was guilty. He the creepiest smile you ever see in your life.
Okay.
We've discussed our.
So, yeah, we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but I did. So the reason I brought up that Mindhunters thing is, I really suggest you guys look into this. Even if you don't watch that show, I think that show is a really excellent bridge between, like a kind of a summary of the ideas that are going behind. Because this is when it's the criminal analysis of the mind of a psychopath. And that's something that we kind of have to do when we're researching why the Parkland shooter did what he did. It's because there was a psychological break, and what are the factors that lead to that? And if
Toxic masculinity.
No, I mean there's a list of factors that contribute to a person becoming either a serial killer or a mass spree killer and things like that. And these are factors that are pretty consistent across the board.
Didn't mean to leave.
And
Stupid dog.
One of the big issues is a lack of a father in the household, right? When you look at the Parkland shooter case, correct me if I'm wrong, no dad around, right?
Yeah, I don't think there was a dad around.
Single mom situation. If you look at a lot of these other shooters and a lot of these other people who got into these situations, the Las Vegas shooter, dad wasn't around because dad was in federal prison or was on the FBI's or being hunted by the FBI, not around to raise kids. There's this pattern of consistency of a lack of a good male role model for psychopaths.
You brought this around with police brutality as well. When we were talking about police brutality and racial division multiplying, HUMANE brought that same point up, and I actually do agree with that a lot.
It's kind of like it has this. It's I don't agree with the butterfly effect, but it's this small change in society that does have this kind of it's because it's not addressed, nothing is done to mitigate it. It does keep building upon itself. It's more of a snowball. Yeah, I guess maybe that's an area where the butterfly effect.
Yeah, but
I've seen the movie though.
Well, I mean, it's the idea that a butterfly flaps its wings and then there's a tsunami in Japan. That doesn't make any sense to me because there's so many other variables that would have to go into making that the butterfly didn't have the set effect.
Would you say the same? Would you say the same thing when people say, "Oh, FDR fixed the economy or ended the Great Depression"? Would you have to say certain variables like? Because I think you may have said something along those lines.
A lot of economists, and I'm in a full agreement with them, think that the New Deal extended the duration of the Great Depression.
Because, yeah, that makes sense.
I think we can chat about that on another stream because I think that'll be interesting. But as you were saying,
so the reason I don't think that this is, the only explanation, or I think it coincides with the explanation for the butterfly effect when I'm talking about lack of fathers in the household. Because it's something that is fairly easy to fix and something that is pretty small in the not small. It's something that it isn't like an impossible or a huge event. It's just, hey, having a dad that sticks around sort of thing. It's not like you're trying to change the tilt of the earth or something crazy like that. It's not like you're sending rockets to blow up asteroids.
We really have to look at it from multiple perspectives.
You're roboting again, Lonely Wolf.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So I don't want to but it is a significant factor, and that's what So the butterfly effect to me doesn't quite make sense because a butterfly flapping its wings is an insignificant factor that people say can contribute to a huge event. But I do agree with the idea that significant factors can cause can be the catalyst that cause these major events, which it seems to be that since there's this common trend of either a lack of a father or stepfathers in these situations. So this is I'm trying hard to find an example of a mass shooter who either who had a steady family life, like a stable family relationship.
Yeah.
Or
what about the Compton guys? Did the Compton shoot? Not the Compton. What was it called? That high school.
Columbine.
The Columbine.
Yeah.
Did they come from a bad household too?
From what I read, listened to the documentary, which if I can find it, I'll post a link to it in the Twitter chat. Their families, one of the shooters' families actually seemed quite stable, at least for the most part. The other one I can't remember, but These dudes,
Yeah.
they had a lot of run-ins with law enforcement, which is something you also got to look out for.
Yes.
They have repeated run-ins with law enforcement.
Well,
which,
that right there shows a lack of a stable family environment because
and the lack of respect of authority.
well, yeah,
Actually, I
repeat
do know something.
encounters with law enforcement, right? If there's a dad who's doing his job, one you get one, you fucked up and you had the cops called once. Okay, that's it. You military school or whatever. That's when you put your foot down. But it's like, okay, you did it once. Okay, twice, 3 times. What the like? That dad's not doing his fucking job.
Yeah.
What you were saying, dude. Sorry, Humane.
Yeah.
Dylan Klebold was one of the Columbine shooters. His father was never there. For him.
Yeah, so there's a pretty consistent
Yeah.
pattern. It's almost across the board. I don't know if it's not 100%. It's in the high 90s.
Yeah, that explains that explains the black community too.
Yes, there's a huge issue, and I mean, and Thomas Sowell has written on this pretty extensively, and Larry Elders has talked about this on his show. When you're talking about there's an issue in the black community with fathers not staying around, and you're seeing this increase in crime rates in that area. Now, there's if you look at other groups that are in similar situations of poverty, like normally, people talk about minorities, they talk about blacks and Hispanics.
Yeah.
But if you look at Asians who are there are Asian ghettos. So this, where people come over and all they speak is their native language, and they don't really, have a good time adopting or
they're Vietnamese.
Yeah, like Vietnamese culture or something like that, where so they speak they speak their native language as opposed to English, and they have a hard time adapting to American culture, and yet you don't see these same kind of crime problems in those other communities. And one thing that you see that is a huge difference is stable family. The stable family unit is pretty predominant with Asian cultures.
Yeah, in Chinatown, you did have a small problem with them triads. These Chinese gangs, not these blood gangs, who were pretty prominent in China, and although they shut them down in Hong Kong, but they stayed active in America in the Chinatowns, and those caused a lot of problems.
Yeah. Well, the triad is similar to the Italian mafia in that it's an organized gang, as opposed to the inner city gangs, which are kind of constantly in gang wars, constantly in disputes like that, whereas the mafia is more of like a business style arrangement. While it's still involved in crime, and while it's still not a good thing for that environment. If you look at it's bad for business to go around to do drive-bys. It's bad for business to have a gang war. Mafias are more interested in control and profits and making money and that sort of thing. And it's very bad for business to get into turf wars, which is why they usually have hostile arrangements between mafia units that sort of thing.
It's expensive in the case of ammunition, lives, and money, and the risk of being arrested. And when it comes to these issues, it's like I think these issues are something that needs to be tackled far more than some of the things that the government pays attention to. Now, in the cases of people having unstable homes, I'm fine with social. What the hell am I thinking of? These social workers. I'm fine with them going around trying to.
Yes.
Yeah,
social workers and child protective services those are two.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, back when my parents were growing up, they didn't really make an effort to try and keep a family together. They would rip them apart in 10 seconds flat. Nowadays, they are trying to make more of an effort, at least from what I've seen in my state anyway. They are trying to keep families together. They're trying to find, separation is like last resort, and things like that should be of last resort. And the issue at hand with education and all these other things, I think the government should, pay attention to that more than other bullshit that isn't helping.
And that's important because you live in Utah. They're Mormons. They have big families, so you have to.
The LDS regime, the Mormon regime, essentially, and trust me, I mean, despite its very socially conservative climate, some things are okay here. But trust me, you go to central Utah in the summer and you wear jeans, you will hate yourself for doing so. I
Why?
guarantee you that. It's hot as fucking balls there, dude. I've been to central and southern Utah. It's absolute hell.
Well, you
go to
live.
northern Utah?
Well, you
I'm in
live.
northern Utah.
Yeah,
I'm in
I
northern Utah.
Yeah.
Not
well,
too far away from Wyoming, though.
Yeah, true. But the thing is that in Utah, it's you're kind of, I think, like the west side of it is in the Great Basin, so it's like really dry down there. The reason why not the Great Basin, yeah, they called the Range and Basin Province because you have like mountain, plain, mountain, plain, mountain, plain, and then down in southern Nevada you have the legal prostitution down there. So yeah.
Nevada. Yeah, I know where you guys are heading off to. I'm kidding, but yeah, yeah. If you ever fly over Utah to Colorado, the mountains are they are such a sight to see.
Yeah.
But if you look at the issue in my state is the suicide rate among teens is something that is truly a need to confront. But yet last year they declared pornography a public health crisis in my state, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, actually,
we have teens.
Pornography does have some bad
the two are not
effects.
completely unrelated.
Such as,
Well,
I can see addiction.
I'm not saying it's not entirely not a public health risk, but at the same time, I'd have to put things in priority. You got the suicide rate in my state, particularly among teenagers. You have the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And addiction is an issue in my state. To me, that is something we need to tackle head on. Pornography addiction is something that is an issue among my fellow Utahns, but I would say which kills more, which causes more harm. Now, in the case of pornography addiction, I can see that leading to some severe problems.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say drug addiction and suicidal could cause more harm. Go ahead.
I don't think it's a public health risk. I think it's more of a mental health risk.
Yeah, mental health risk. We actually had a sex education class on that
It's probably
issue.
bad for people's sex lives. I mean, picture this: there's a man who's like watching porn all the time, and all of a sudden he stops midway through fucking her, and then she's like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, I learned this on Pornhub. It's called buffering."
Yeah, and or the student his dominant hand is like the size of is just like a fucking ripped arm, and the other arm's like a weak girl.
Well, there are studies, and I don't know if there's several interviews. Dang, I wish I could remember the guy's name. I'm drawing a blank, but there's a psychiatrist and his wife, who's also a psychiatrist, who started investigating this, and they were talking about they were dealing with people with erectile dysfunction, and they started looking into porn as a whole and the detrimental effect it's having on men, and it is a psychosis issue because it's having. You would think that it would just affect sex life and things along those lines, which is why they started investigating it. But they're seeing that this is causing a ripple effect in young men because, it causes social anxiety and social. Let's see what's the word I'm looking for. The inability to interact socially well with others because they're so used to being distant and being viewing everything as people and situations as objects rather than actually experiencing it as a real thing.
Yeah, and I will say that
and there's a limit to there's a limit. It's not like permanent damage. It's not like the days where we say
that's the thing is they're seeing
it's like the nervous system to be unduly stimulated. So much and so frequently. Of course, people want to orgasm here and there, a few times a week, but several times a day, and you'd be wearing out your nervous system. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is same way with a drug addiction.
Dull.
The same way with the drug addiction, you build up a tolerance, and then you have to continually. So people with a drug addiction, they don't take drugs to get high anymore. They take drugs to feel normal because without drugs, everything seems so subdued and so bland and so lifeless that they take drugs to get back to a normal level. And that's the same thing they're seeing with people who are addicted to porn is it gets to the point where they have to like overindulge in pornography to feel normal again, and that becomes
And
the base.
and the thing, and also the pornography gets worse as it goes on. It may start out as something innocent, like a girl rubbing, lotion on her boobs, and 12 months down the line, you're watching a 4-foot Asian woman with a fish in her ass,
Yeah.
Oh, there was a video of a Japanese girl was shooting eels at her ass across the room, and then another Japanese girl catches it in her mouth.
And now,
so that's why you have these like huge extremes, because the normal people get immune to the normal. They build up a tolerance to the normal, and they have to keep going more and more extreme.
Yeah, and the issue is that if you declared a public health crisis because it's of its effects on mental health, like usually when they would declare a health crisis, I would question the motive as to why. Now, if you were doing it because like the reports of it having effects on mental health and it causing harm to people's lives, people have argued whether or not it will increase people's risk of committing violent crimes, then okay, I can see maybe declaring it a public health crisis. However, I would still prioritize the issue of drug addiction, which has killed probably far more than the pornography addiction.
Yeah.
Also, and like the suicide rate, which my lieutenant governor of Utah, Spencer J. Cox, he said that we need to talk about suicide in my state because it is a real issue that the state of Utah is facing. I don't know about your guys' states. I don't know what states
Suicide is a huge problem in the United States as a whole.
Yeah, that's
true. What?
Throughout the United States,
illness in general, though.
Yeah. So I'm trying to. So what states are you guys in?
I think the two are related.
I'm in Florida.
The mass shootings and the suicide things. I think that there is an underlying root cause that kind of associates both situations.
Because there's sort of a lot of explanations. The one thing that's a little bit bothersome that I find troublesome is when people are using a specific prism. So they've got this a priori type belief system, and then when they see something like a shooting, they see it through that lens. So probably one of the worst ones is when they say, toxic masculinity, and that's sort of like I've got no problem with the underlying concept or like any of those theories or whatsoever, but they have their place, but it has limitations. Like we need to refer this to experts, and there's also you're looking at the sociological parts, but there's also stuff that's psychological, or perhaps it's the nature versus nurture. And when we look at male behavior, so for example, intelligence, like like from what I've heard, this is just from the grapevine that, males and females, we have pretty much the same average intelligence, but then, males, like when it comes to a lot of metrics, we seem to have this standard deviation that makes us either, morons or geniuses. So it happens in a lot. So it seems like the male capacity is for, extremism.
Okay, so
the women are clustered down around the middle. They cluster around the average.
Yeah.
It's like if you had 100 test scores, and all 100 scored a 50, you still have an average of 50. And if you had 100 test scores, and half of them scored a 10, and the other half scored 100, actually maybe let me do the math. It'd be close to the middle as well, right? It'd be around 50. Maybe it's half of them score 0 and the other half 100. Yeah, there we go. That's the math. I'm Asian, I should know this. Okay, so if half of them score 0 and the other half score 100, you still get an average of 50. And so that's the difference between men and women. Tend to be like the 100 people all scoring a 50, and then men tend to be like 50 of them score 0 and the other 50 score 100.
And so here's among these states, if you look here, apparently according to this, Missouri kicks off the list of some of the most depressed states. Which, as for which state has the highest, I'm still trying to find that. But
and the thing is, with
look more items on there.
People thinking porn's going to be like drugs.
I'm
gonna give this question. When you're gonna see someone saying this, yo man, I'll suck your dick for a copy of Dick Does Dallas.
Jesus.
Do you think porn in a way can lead to suicide?
I'm not sure. That's what I was starting to bring up.
Many ways.
I think it's like anything else that, if it's taking away from time, like if you're not going out to get fresh air and, going for a walk and, getting exercise, like if it's taking up all your time, of course that's going to feed into a depression because, it's like you're missing out. But I've noticed a lot of people who are the real chronic masturbators. They seem to be very fatigued and kind of dull and tired, and I think it's because they just like throughout that given week they've probably worn out their nervous system with the because the orgasm is a very big strain on the nervous system, and they're probably ejaculating a lot of fluid, which has like got certain nutrients in it. So
Yeah.
they probably drain themselves. And it's not. I'm not saying that's a permanent thing. I'm just saying that
the other
Zinc.
for that
Zinc.
week of
Well,
high
the other
masturbation.
thing is your body's primary function. It's going to prioritize reproduction. So if you know if you orgasm and you ejaculate or whatever, and your body's like, oh hey, we're out of man juice. We gotta pump up production. It's going to take resources from other areas of your body in order to prioritize that. That's one of your primary functions as a biological entity. Is hey, your body is like, hey, I need to reproduce.
Another effect would happen because you're jacking it so many times. It's going to take longer and longer to climax. So you're going to go to an extreme measure like autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
And that does have impact on that person's social life, which is what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
the other thing is
anxiety.
it gets people to a situation where reality doesn't match their expectations of reality, and that is a pretty huge detrimental impact to people. Is if you look at a suicide situation, or something that will drive someone to suicide, is they're expecting something out of life or something out of an experience, and then they have that experience and it doesn't match up. And this is something I've talked about when talking about the transgender surgery, right? They're told, hey, this is the solution, this is what you want, this is going to fix everything, and they have the surgery and they feel great for a couple of weeks or maybe months, and then they're like, oh, now I'm back to normal. This didn't solve anything. This didn't fix my problem.
Yeah, I mean,
and you see
there are
these
some
huge, they're still strikingly high suicide rates post-operation.
Because there are cases of kind of this rush towards kind of surgery and hormone intervention and things like that, and some people may have regretted going back. And
and,
sort of
and relating that to porn is people are so used to these these pornographic situations, and they get to actual sex, and they're like, no, this is nothing like that. Like the porn I'm watching, this is so tame and boring. They get bored with actual sex because they're so used to it being.
Kinda.
I think there's one movie that I think is like it shows into the life of like somebody who's sex addicted, and it's a movie called Shame. It's a movie pretty much goes through the day in the life of like a sex addicted man, and it's a rough and I haven't seen the film. I've seen like videos of it. It's a pretty graphic film from the look of it, but it pretty much shows the sort of loneliness and kind of all the problems that come with being sex addicted and whatnot.
I thought you were gonna mention Don Juan, or is it Don Juan or Don John or something? But let's see, what's his name?
So what do you guys think of this article right here, which reports that the state of Alaska has one of the higher suicide rates?
Well, you can't. The thing is, you can't. I don't think they should count Alaska because there's times where that place would get cold. You don't really know how a person would die out there.
I'm not sure why
if they end up shooting themselves, it seems pretty obvious.
What is
here's the methods they use. Go over this. So while white people in the United States have the recorded highest suicide rates of suicide, followed by Native Americans, and so on. Use method of suicide at 49.9% of the deaths, followed by suffocation, poisoning, and other methods of the deaths. Due to the stigma associated with suicide, most of the cases go unreported and untreated. States have increased by 24% in the last 15 years. From 10.5 to 13.0% in persons, suicide takes about 24% for fatal injuries, causing massive economic losses. And if you guys want to see the full thing, the link. But I do recommend you guys check it out. But Missouri is apparently the most depressed, has one of the higher depression rates, but Alaska has one of the higher suicide rates. This sounds contradictory, but at the same time,
Well, I mean, I've never been to Alaska, but it seems like a very bleak and depressing place to be and try to live.
Well, it depends on what you like. If you like to live out in the wilderness, you like to live alone, that's another place. But if you're like me, I need to be around people to a degree, but I can go long periods without, talking to people. But also,
Yeah, same.
yeah, I just have to keep myself preoccupied. I just have to walk out, go around, and I think that's why when people because in certain like northern Alaska, there's entire throts of the year, entire parts where you cannot walk outside because it's so cold and stormy and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
dark.
does
But they
it
get used to
list the factors that are involved in Alaska's suicide rate? I wonder how much of that is economically related.
Maybe.
Because Alaska tends to be kind of like feast and famine type economic situation.
Yeah, and actually, that could be a discussion for another time. Is a way to create jobs, and that involves the environment. But if you guys haven't seen the news recently, but yeah, I mean, you have to take into account of the economics of the state or the location in question, and the social climate and things like that. So
but does that article mention contributing factors as to why the suicide rate in Alaska is so high, or does it just say this is?
I think it because I'm going to go back and give it a second look, but I think it did mention economic, something about economics in there. So let me just go back.
So there's several things that lead to suicide. One of the huge things is finances, like economic situation. Which is kind of weird because another contributing factor to suicide is also divorce. And if you look at divorce, the number one contributing factor to divorce is economics, right? It's he didn't make enough money, or he got laid off, and that sort of thing. And these compound together. So not only are you struggling financially, and so that leads people to suicide, but it's also, you're struggling financially, and that leads you to a divorce. And now you've got the financial issues that haven't disappeared because of the divorce. And now the person that you were with or whatever is now left you, and your life is in complete disarray. So you've got those two compounding things, which increases the risk of suicide.
And also,
all right, so the article in question mentions the reason. So it says, the most common cause for suicide is depression. Most of the people who've committed suicide are known to be chronically depressed and feel that death is the only form of escape and relief from their depression. It mentions alcoholism, terminal illness, substance abuse, financial difficulties, relationship problems, failure, or bullying. Illnesses such as schizophrenia, mental disorders, and personality disorders compel some people to kill themselves.
The chronic depression thing doesn't make sense to me because that's like an umbrella category where that's not a specific... Yeah. Depression isn't... I know that there's people who have said that this is all bunk science, and depression is an actual like chemical thing in the brain or something like that. But it makes more sense that it's not. It's a psychological thing, not as opposed to a biological thing. If you're chronically depressed, that means something in your life isn't going correctly, and if you fix that, well, then you eliminate the depression. And yet, for some reason, we're throwing pills at that.
Yeah,
it's not addressing the source of the problem. That seems the chronic depression seems more like a symptom of a root cause as opposed to the cause itself.
People have also talked about clinical depression. Like they say, if you have low mood and all these certain symptoms for at least 2 weeks, they say you have clinical depression. I'm not saying I think that it's incorrect to call it clinical depression, but I'm just hesitant about using the term unless it's a doctor. I tend to trust doctors more than just like
but this is something. So some of the stuff that I'm talking about is spurred by the things that I'm reading in Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, because he was talking about negative feedback loops. And he's talking about his because he was a clinical psychologist, and he was talking about experiences in that where people who have agoraphobia, it starts off as one negative situation. And
what is agoraphobia?
It's where you can't go outside. You stay inside. You stay in your house, and you can't leave. And it gets.
It's like that SpongeBob episode. That SpongeBob episode. Remember when he really hurt his butt like he slammed down on the ground or something and smashed it to pieces, and the doctor put it back together, and they told him that if he ever happens to him again, he'll have to have the iron butt, and he said, and he didn't want that, and so he became very protective of his hind end and made it look, and it looked like everybody was about to smash his hind end, so he just went, I can't do this anymore, I can't go outside, so I'm just gonna stay inside with a tissue, Penny, and what was the third one?
That's what he has to
And so even though that was for comedic purposes, the concepts behind it are actually pretty sound.
Accurate.
Yeah, it's because it's some event occurs in this person's life, and they're like, okay, I need to avoid that from ever happening again, and they start shielding themselves from things that have caused, and eventually they keep shielding themselves more and more until they're so trapped by their own. I can't risk doing anything that is going to cause me that pain or that situation again, and they continually retract from society until they're stuck in a one room of their house because everything else outside of that is so scary and so so the antithesis of what, and so the reason
Also,
I forget what we were talking about prior to that when I mentioned the negative feedback loops. And that's what you're seeing in all of these situations, okay? The negative feedback loops when you're talking about psychosis and chronic depression is people get themselves in the cycle where they're depressed, and because they're depressed, they withdraw from their group of friends, and that leads to them being more depressed because now there's nobody to talk to, and they get more depressed, and then they withdraw even more, and so that's the main thing I wanted to kind of address tonight is the shooters, the suicides, and the censorship issues. They all have those negative feedback loops that all have that same kind of common thread between them of this is something that, that was bad or whatever, and so then we withdraw that and we cut off that part of society, and then we shrink back and we shrink back and we shrink back and shrink back until we're trapped in our own a prison of our own making. And that's what all of these people put themselves into those situations.
Yeah. So to show you guys what HUMANe was talking about when he was asking, I think, a few questions. So this is, if you Google depression, just the word depression, it shows some medical stuff right here. Possible causes include a combination of biological sources of distress. Increasingly, research may cause changes in brain function, including altered activity of certain neural circuits in the brain.
Yeah, and that's a very bizarre phenomenon and this is a feedback loop. Is you get depressed, and so then your body's biology change, your body reacts in a chemical way due to that depression. This is the first chapter of Jordan Peterson's book when he's talking about lobsters, and after a defeat, their serotonin levels, which makes it more likely they'll be defeated again in a fight with another lobster. And when they win a fight, their serotonin levels increase, which makes it more likely they're going to keep winning. And it's it's a really, really amazing book so far. I've only been through like the first 2 chapters.
It makes sense because the more you lose, the more you just kind of say, I give up, I give up,
Yeah.
And it actually has a chemical change on your body, which makes it harder to succeed in the future. And so these cases of clinical depression, it's like, well, you're depressed, and then your body reacts and it gives off the chemical that there's a chemical change in your body, which makes it more likely that you are going to be depressed in the future. And so right now we're just analyzing the cycles that exist, and I don't know if there's a one common or if there's a one solution that will break these cycles, but I think it's a very good practice to analyze, okay, these cycles exist, and these are contributing factors that force people into these negative cycles.
Yeah.
And if we can identify that, then we can help them find solutions to get out of this, because it seems for the people who go on mass shootings, right? This is the mind of a psychological or a psychopath. Is they start off small and they slowly build it, and they slowly build and slowly build until the animal cruelty and all that's not enough, and they've got to go the more extreme. And it's the same thing with the drug addict, right? They start off small, and then eventually they have to increase their doses or try harsher substances, and it eventually destroys their life. And the same thing with like the porn addicts, right? They start off small, watching minor pornography, and eventually they get to the extreme where they're watching apparently eels being shot out of some woman's ass. And there's a common pattern, a common thread between all of those, and that's what I just wanted to point out in this stream, is that you see these, even though the end result is something different, it's still life destroying.
Chair is having a debate with Gemini and some red robot about space colonization. Oh, this is gonna be fun. I'll be back.
Oh fuck.
Oh, this is gonna be funny. All right, I'll be back.
So
yeah.
Okay. So someone in the chat by the name of Lord Pepe says he might have some insight. So I just posted the link in the live chat. If he can join us.
Well, we're down to 4, so I mean, if you want to send him the link, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and then there were 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't we?
Okay, let me just. So the live chat is it is going by a little bit on my end. Yeah. So another thing about the issue of suicide is like the awareness of it. Like in my state, I've attended to support people I know who have anxiety or other mental health concerns. These things about suicide awareness, they do it at my high school, and they've done it at the other schools I've attended, and I think that it is a good way to make people aware of it. And I will, Lord Pepe, do you got a Twitter or something? Well, and besides, if trolls get in, there's a way for me to actually prevent people from actually joining without even having to eject them. So
okay. And so, while you're getting that situated, there's something else I wanted to say. So this is the part of the reason I brought up Mind Hunters is because it's a fascinating study into the psychotic mind. But one of the things that I didn't realize until they pointed out in the show, and then after I was like, wait a minute, that can't be true. And then I started looking into this, and I'm like, that's something that it was kind of glossed over in the show, but it stuck out incredibly profound to me. Is they were talking about the FBI was formed to stop people like, Al Capone and, Babyface, and these bank robbers, right? Who are crossing state lines and getting around the legal system and all that sort of thing. But as the FBI went on, they started to see this massive explosion in psychotic behaviors and an increase in serial killers, and an increase in people with, like, vastly, detrimental behavior. Because people like Al Capone, yes, he was malicious and violent, and his organization ended up, hurting a lot of people and killing people and all that sort of thing. But there wasn't that chaotic malevolence like you see with a serial killer, right? Al Capone killed people, but it was for a reason, whereas a serial killer kills people, like, there's no logical reason to go around murdering women. Just random women you met or just happen to pick up, which is what a lot of these serial killers do. Al Capone killed people, but it was like, okay, I can understand why it's, because you wanted the business or whatever, or they were interfering with your livelihood, and so you felt threatened, so you retaliate with violence, and it's not justifiable, but it's understandable. But just randomly ending a life because your mom hurt you, that's like, wait, no, there's some kind of disconnect here. If your mom hurt you, then take it out with her, not on random women who've done nothing to you. Or at least, so that's where you see these disconnect. And it started around, I think, the 1930s, where we're starting to see these psychotic people, like, because, I mean, there's Jack the Ripper, and there's a couple other instances throughout history, but...
Ed Gein.
Ed Gein. I think it was Ed Gein. He did that type of thing too, and it was right fucked up.
What time frame was that?
Ed Gein.
Sorry, what?
The guy.
That name doesn't ring a bell for me. What time period is Ed Gein?
I think he was around the Actually, I'm trying to remember what time period he was. Let me.
He was in the 30s, actually.
The 1930s.
Oh, in the 30s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these serial killers, like these notorious, you can look at the time frames of these people who are renowned, and so part of it is a lack of documentation. I understand that. The other part of it is that there is a increase in psychosis, like, globally. and the amount of people
Yeah.
who trigger these either mass killing sprees or serial killer sprees or serial killing instances.
So
That's relatively unheard of throughout human history, because if it was happening on the same massive scale it is right now, there would definitely be more news articles and more reports of this sort of thing, because there's reports on all kinds of stuff. But I mean, you know, ever since the printing press, we've got a pretty good track record of historical events that is pretty solid and pretty widespread. Something like, you know, hey, there's massive death going on. There's people going around killing multiple victims. That sort of thing. I mean, they're documenting like petty crimes and stuff like this. Like if you look back at the American West, I mean, they're documenting train robberies. We know all about let's see. I mean, I guess Billy the Kid, not necessarily a train robber, but Jesse James and the OK Corral and all of these other, Pinkerton was mostly Jesse James, right? But I mean, we know about these outlaws and these the villains of the West because they document everything. But like, do you know of like a serial killer in the West? Something like that would be newsworthy. At least, I mean, even if they exaggerated it, those sorts of things.
I put in Ed Gein's profile in the chat. Who he is?
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The
So
serial killers in the Western United States.
So here's the thing.
There was one in my
1906,
state.
yeah. But there's actually photos of him. That's what I'm talking about. Is like a little bit over 100 years ago, there wasn't this. Serial killers wasn't even a thing. It actually, the term serial killer wasn't even in existence until the FBI started documenting these cases, and they didn't have a term
in the 1980s.
for it. Yeah.
In the 1980s, the term serial killer started to be used.
Yeah. That's because they hadn't had a need for it before then. That's the thing that struck me as absolutely. I was like, wait a minute, what? They hadn't had a need because there was no real history aside from like these rare examples of like Jack the Ripper and a couple other brutal like maybe Vlad the Impaler could be considered that sort of thing. But I mean, there's very few people throughout history. I mean, yeah, okay, so Genghis Khan, Vlad the Impaler, of course, those were people of leadership.
Caligula.
So Caligula. Very few people, and yet in the last 100 or so years, like, you've got more serial killers in the span of a decade than there have been in the entire human history prior to that. And you're like, wait a minute, whoa. Something changed in the last 100 or so years in order to cause this kind of change, this massive shift in society. And I don't know what exactly that is, but it seems like we can see this point in history where things just kind of flipped and there's this small change, and you're like, okay, so the past 6,000 years of documented human history, there's been about 15 mass killers. Last 100 years, there's been about 100 times that amount.
Yeah,
and it's not just the invention of firearms, because firearms were around as well. I mean, firearms were around for a couple 100 years before the last 100 years. I mean, it's and people are like, oh yeah, guns are causing these violent situations. I'm like, no, something else is going on here.
Yeah, there was one notorious serial killer in my state, and he was kind of he kind of made people wary of letting their kids roam around outside all by their lonesome. Let me see if I can find it, because my state rarely executes people, and the guy's name was. Well, let's see what the bastard's name was.
Yeah, and again, look at the time frame for this guy.
His name was Arthur Bishop. He was executed in 1988, and I'm going to see when the time frame of the crime was.
1980s. There's no way he was prior to 1930.
Yeah, he was in the late 80s. He was executed. He was convicted of 5 counts of aggravated murder. His crimes happened in 1983, from 1979 to 1983.
And so we've got a new guest, Lord something. It just says Lord.
Lord Feather. Hi
They
there.
wanted an invite to talk about this the issue at hand. So you said in the chat, "Fuck me, I could refute this." Invite again, please. I have history
Wait.
for it.
Refute what?
Oh, okay.
Exactly?
There was a single point. Timothy. So earlier you mentioned there was an increase in serial killings.
Yeah, or at least there seems to be. Is that not true?
There seems to be. I wouldn't know, but if you want to claim it, you sort of like. I would expect you to provide any evidence for it. Like, I mean,
Okay.
I would expect it
Let's
to be
see,
true just because it would be better recorded, because it's nearer to the modern era.
Well, okay, so this is not
I can literally point you to medieval serial killers in Iceland. That would be medieval stuff, but
That's true.
then again,
Elizabeth Bathory is considered a serial killer.
yeah, there's like the Dracula and all that nonsense.
Yeah,
But
Vlad the Impaler.
the
Yeah,
thing,
it's-
if you're dealing with medieval sources, it's sort of hard to compare them to like, modern sources, because medieval sources are sort of crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
it's the history is written by the victors, and so if you're the brutal masochist and mass murderer, you're gonna say that I'm the best person who ever lived. You're not gonna say, oh yeah, I brutally murdered and slaughtered this many people, and I'm the bad guy. You're not gonna depict yourself as the bad guy. But even then, like, even though they portrayed themselves as whatever, we can look back at it now, knowing what we know about like our history, and
Oh, come on.
there's
Timothy.
very little record
Timothy,
of
Timothy.
Yeah.
Like, not all persons in the medieval era were mass murdering.
I know.
Killers.
That's not what he
Yeah,
said.
I'm saying that the phenomenon of serial killers that
term.
we're seeing right now, not just the term, the mental attitude and behavior of these people. I mean, there've always been psychopaths. That seems to be pretty evident. That there's always been psychopaths and sociopaths. However, psychopaths and sociopaths don't always go on killing sprees or don't always destroy things. I mean, a lot of CEOs are very productive, and yet they have very psychopathic tendencies. That's what makes them good at their jobs. So they manage to channel that psychotic behavior or that psychopathic behavior into something productive. But it's only been about the last 100 years that we're seeing these psychopathic tendencies or these psychotic tendencies going to pure malevolence. And so maybe it's a factor of maybe we're now more aware of it, and so we're keeping track or keeping better tabs on it. That may be the case. I don't know. But the very instant or the fact that we didn't even consider that this phenomenon was something we needed to pay attention to until the last 100 years, that speaks a lot, in at least as far as my mind, because arson was the thing, for forever ago, right? Arson, burglary. We already have all these terms for these events, but it's not until recently that we start seeing this. Oh, there's people who do this multiple times, and who have a pattern of doing this. It may just be that we didn't recognize it or we didn't see it, and now that we see it, we can't unsee it. That might be the case. But
actually, Timmy,
okay.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Actually, since you mentioned arson, there was actually a case like before Christ, like in medieval, not medieval, like antique Greece. There was a guy that burned the temple, and he was like ejected from history. They put him to death, and they struck out every reference to his name in history as an added punishment.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
I understand.
He was a crazy arsonist. So.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with that behavior or that treatment of the person who did this, because right now we've got too many serial killers that you know by name. That's a problem.
Yes.
They strike them from the record, but his actions were still documented. The amount of documented actions so like the Portland killer, right? I mean, hopefully nobody uses his name and all that sort of thing. This person should be doomed to obscurity, and their action should be remembered, but they, fuck them, forget them. They're not worthy of having their name documented.
Yeah,
having your name embedded and immortalized in history is something for people who did things productive for humanity.
So, like, if you're a terrorist, we shouldn't use your name. Like the person who committed the Oklahoma City bombing, we shouldn't use his name.
But the event and the loss of life and the massive destruction should be documented because we're like, okay, so this is a teaching point: is how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Which is part of what we're trying to get, or what I'm hoping we can try to get to the root of. And so maybe I'm wrong on this position, and maybe I'm wrong on this point, but it seems to be the case. This wasn't even something that was considered up until the more recent history, that this phenomenon wasn't worth documenting prior to the last 100-ish years.
Actually, I sort of agree with you, at least in the present term. I'm not quite convinced that this wasn't documented before, or now that argument, maybe not. You have to provide some really extensive evidence for it, but I can't ask you for it in a live stream. It's a bit unfair. But
I'm looking this stuff up.
I get where you're coming from, and this wasn't like serial killers aren't like a thing in ancient history.
I know it might have just been because everybody was brutal back then.
Things were a lot brutal back then. Like children were having cockfights and whatnot in the streets, and it's like sometimes you wouldn't even understand like a medieval society. It's like they were literally like holding trials over barnyard animals, because do you know the trial of the cock?
Nope.
Okay.
There was in medieval Germany there was a trial of the cock that he was tried by the church for violating the state of nature because he laid an egg.
All right, but I do have this, and this is not a definitive source. So this is the list of serial killers before 1900, and this is from Wikipedia. So I mean, take that with a grain of salt that it deserves.
It does provide links, like when you use Wikipedia articles, sometimes they'll have little links or citations at the end of a sentence. So it does hold some water. So as essentially over the course of that time,
let's see.
Especially female serial killers got away with their crimes a whole lot more. Like the idea of a female serial killer, people usually rejected the idea of women doing things like that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So enlighten us, Timothy.
10.
But
11,
while he's
12,
doing that, how you doing, Lord
13,
Pepe?
4. Okay, so so this is Wikipedia. So I don't know if they've got everything, but there are 14 prior to 1600s. So again, you gotta consider. Okay, there's a lack of documentation. There's a lack. I mean, most history was oral at that point in human history, and it was very hard to keep good records on people. And we know very little as far as we know very little that is historically accurate based on, and what we do know is based on what little literature we have. But 14 prior to the 1600s. So these are serial killers before 1900. That's the list that I sent in the Hangout chat, and I will post that in the
description.
At least my Hangout or my live chat on.
Actually, Timothy, I'll grant you that this is a really interesting hypothesis, but I think you sort of underestimate how really crazy medieval and 17th century sources are. They are like, they have these serial killers there probably, but I have like sources from the 13th century regarding Iceland, for example. I'm just mentioning because I know them. I don't expect you to know them, but they are sort of all these medieval sources that I know from medieval Iceland, because I'm Icelandic. They are sort of, it's like based on a true story. It's not like a really solid historical fact. These stories that they have recited over the years, it's like sort of like you would watch a Hollywood movie that was quote unquote based on a true story.
If what you're saying, it sounds kind of like a legend, right? Or
I mean,
what's the word?
if you're citing 16th century sources, it's sort of like a legend, really.
Yeah, it's like there's something happened, a true event, but over time it gets exaggerated to be more than what it was. But
Actually-
it's still told as if it's true, like the Pecos Bill thing, right? We've got those the tall tales in the United States, right? The Americas. You got Pecos Bill, John Henry, Calamity Jane, and people like that were like they were Paul Bunyan, Davy Crockett is still. I mean, it's a real person, did a lot of things, but his legend is bigger than him, right? And in England, they've got Robin Hood, right? Real person, real events, but the story of what he did is so much bigger than what he actually did. And so with this case where you're talking about in Iceland is yes, there's stories of people who did brutal things, and over time it's treated more like a fairy tale or like a, it turns that actual event into kind of like a boogeyman, right? Is that
Actually,
am I understanding that correctly?
Have you? It's a good point for you, but have you considered the fact that most of the quote-unquote serial killers were actually Anglo-Saxon?
Yeah, that's pretty well documented.
What's wrong with you Anglo-Saxons?
I don't know. Well, is it just that? Well, there's several. I don't know what could be contributing to that, and I'm actually not Anglo-Saxon, at least to the best of my knowledge. I might be, but
No, I like most Americans to the Northeast and Englishmen are definitely Anglo-Saxon, but a lot of the serial killers were Anglo-Saxon. I mean, there are not a lot of Nordic serial killers. There's a Russian serial killer like the what's it called, the game with the like pawns and whatever, the chess serial killer, and there was the vampire of Iran, and there are all sorts of serial killers all over the world, but I think the Anglo-Saxons are perhaps overrepresented.
7, 8. Yeah, I think they are overrepresented, and I'm not sure why exactly that is. I mean, there might be multiple factors as far as the majority of serial killers that are documented in places where they tend to document crimes, which happen to be mostly westernized Anglo-Saxon cultures. Because you still have like brutal warlords in Africa, and Africa doesn't keep any documentation of people who are doing things in 2018 that would be serial killer psychotic behavior. They're not documenting their serial killers right now in Zimbabwe and these places where warlords are kind of like the norm.
Hey,
actually, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? You know what my answer is? The same logic as they try to do if they banned video games or try to do it with guns. I don't know if you can read that.
Video games made me do it.
Well, that's
I saw that.
Well, that's the same argument that Eminem was using. Like, I mean, back when he was actually relevant and actually a good rapper before he went all whatever.
No, he sucks today, man.
Bullshit.
His album was okay. That's the only reason why I gave it a positive review.
Yeah.
It was okay.
So, and I really like because he got that one line in his song where he's talking about it's like, they say my music made him do it, but did it load the gun and pull the trigger?
Oh, yeah, that's the exact lyric.
Yeah. Hey, Jocelyn, did you Google its new video on you? It's pretty cancerous.
Did he just make it?
Yeah, she made it a few hours ago. Like, it's so fucking hilarious. It's hilarious, but it's stupid.
I didn't feel like responding to it because it was so stupid. Like, I did a Google impression to respond to it.
I swear to God, when Google it does those, because what she does is she uses Google Hangouts to record her stuff, but instead of using her real voice, she uses Google Translate like a total pussy. Fucking hilarious.
Well, how do you know that she actually doesn't? I mean, she might have had emphysema and had to have her vocal box removed, and so that's her speak and spell voice.
Man, I am so emphysema phobic.
Yeah, I mean, how do you know that's not the only way that she can communicate?
You know what? I
sounds like a dude. Like,
I think I need to check my privilege.
Deeper voice than most of us. And that's why she does that.
Guys.
Yeah, but yeah.
Do you know the word anti-Satanism?
Never heard of it.
No.
You're the first person to mention it.
Okay. In every other European language except English, gypsies are referred to as Sigan or Sigani or something of the sort. I was actually looking into like a serial murders in the Hungary, and I went to this village called Tatar St. Georgi or something St. George, and I went to the grave of like a 28-year-old man and a 5-year-old kid, and they threw like these Molotov cocktails at their house, and when they came out running, they shot them. They were like these neo-Nazis, and the police there, they were like, "Oh, this looks like insurance fraud." And there's the same thing happening in Slovakia. There's literally like I'm trying to explain this to. I assume most of you are American, but there's literally like segregation in Central Europe, like between non-gypsy and gypsy. They put up like walls in between the villages, like inside the village, like walls between the non-gypsy and the gypsy, and they put the gypsies in another class. And I mean, perhaps you have never heard of this, but I hadn't, because I'm in a Nordic country where it's all sort of homogeneous. But I'm an exchange student in Hungary, and there are like 5% of the population is actually like Sigan or Roma, it's actually, I think it has a lot of similarities between the gypsies in Europe and to the black people in America, because it's like they have faced like centuries of discrimination. Actually, before they went to Europe in the first place, they were actually like Dalits, like without class. Go ahead. I have been talking a lot.
Blacks don't really face discrimination in America, because if they did, we wouldn't have had a black president for 8 years.
Well,
No,
I
he's
mean,
not talking about now, I think.
yeah, but I mean, you could also bring up that, I mean, yeah, we did have a black president for 8 years. I mean, but I mean, that didn't necessarily change racial attitudes. I will say that maybe it did a little bit. Maybe it had some effect, but I would say at the same time that it wouldn't.
More accepting.
But I don't see how it would necessarily change. Like, I don't see the correlation between a black person being inaugurated as the president of the United States and people's attitudes about race changing. That was one thing that always made me hesitant to, when people would say that things have changed just because we had a black president. I just never saw the correlation. I mean,
yeah, like a redneck is going to be racist towards Obama, whether he was the greatest president since.
Obama done did it. Obama was born in Kenya, y'all. that bullshit.
They only say Kenya because he's black, I think. Like, if they have some other reason, that's fine. It's still stupid.
I think he was born. I think he was born in the United States. I think people were just finding things to bitch about, and I'm like, unless you can prove that he wasn't, then you can say it all you want, but that doesn't mean anything. But,
actually, can I interject? There was I saw a picture of John Romney's family. And they were like huge. They were like a huge family. And I saw a picture of Obama's family, and he was actually raised by white people. I mean, Obama isn't he just as white as he is black? Come on.
He's mixed race. I
saw of his parents. They were wearing like these dark sunglasses because they were so white that the skin reflected so much sun. They had to wear sunglasses because, otherwise they'd go blind.
Obama kind of seemed like a white guy trying to play like a black guy.
Obama wasn't very black. I mean, I'm serious. Romney was more black than
like when some
because
old white
Romney had a
person
big
tries
family.
to,
It's like a huge family. It's just like you would imagine a black family picture, like
those cringy like 80s when white people tried to rap. That's what Obama kind of reminded me when he tried to do anything that was thug or gangster. He's like, oh, dude, no, this is worse than the 80s raps.
Yeah,
Obama. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. When he says, yeah, go ahead. My
Okay,
point is
sorry.
useless.
Okay. Obama wasn't like African American. He was like, his father was from Africa, literally from like he was like
Yeah.
like going.
But Obama's from Hawaii.
Yeah, he was raised by a single white mother the whole time. It's like he is really disconnected from like the African American experience. It's like
I don't like that term, to be
Well, the
honest.
other-
African American.
I don't
think
like
it's a
that
stupid
either.
term.
The
I think it's
other
a
thing about
ridiculous term.
Obama is while he did have a single mom because his dad left and went back to Kenya and all that, his grandparents were really well off, and so the majority of his early life, and his whole college and all that sort of thing was funded by his grandparents.
Oh, I didn't know that about him. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah,
that's cool.
His grandparents are pretty wealthy, and they
and
I just
maybe
thought he like did so good in high school that
I think he may have done. I have not looked at his education record because I don't know. If
there's something else. I don't know how true this is. Supposedly he he got college scholarships based on being a dual citizen because he had citizenship in the Philippines as well as the United States.
But that's
not.
I don't,
that one's a little uncertain for me because I've heard conflicting reports on that.
I'd really have to see where the reports were, but essentially, that actually would lead to an interesting idea for some streams in the future. Is you choose some of the more recent presidents and you comb through their presidencies and see were they good, were they bad, see how it goes.
Scrutiny.
You know what we could do? Like we could do comparison from. We could do a random generator from the. I think isn't our current president the 45th?
Yes, he is the 45th president of the United States.
44th, and we compare him to that through a chart like Deep Fat Fry did.
Like approval ratings and let's you would analyze from the beginning of their presidencies, their approval rating over time, and basically the state of the country when they assumed and transferred the presidency to whoever was the successor. But basically, I
wonder what would happen if like I heard like. Back in the day, did they? I'm not really knowing. I always wondered, did they have to? Did they choose to? If they lost, they had to like give it to the next person, or if they won,
they like if you win the presidency, like if you win a second term, you don't have to give it anything to your opponent. They actually will give you a concession letter or something like that. If you if you lose, you give a concession. It's tradition. But basically, I guess we could go from FDR, or if we want to go further back, and basically go from FDR to now.
I didn't know.
So
I knew about FDR, but I didn't know why he kept going on. Besides, he was.
There was no term limits. Eisenhower was the first one.
I know there was no term limits, but why did he keep? What was the reasons why he kept?
He was drafted by his party, and people really liked him. He was very well liked by the Democratic Party, and the thing that struck me odd is he had 3 vice presidents. Like the party was weird about that, about the vice presidents.
Actually, there was like I remember I was watching a documentary on like Iwo Jima or something, and there was actually a Japanese prisoner of war that asked if he was going to serve the 3rd term. It has, if I understand correctly, it had just been a tradition that a president would resign after the 2nd term.
They would only serve 2 terms.
Yeah, but it was just a tradition. It wasn't actually put into law. But after
until 1951,
after that, they put it into law. If I understand correctly.
Yes, but you can technically you can technically avoid it. But if you serve only 2 terms, you only serve 2 years of if you're the vice president and you serve 2 years of your president's term, you could legally have 2 full terms in your own right. If you serve any more than 2 years, you can only have 1. From what I understand of the Constitution. Second Amendment.
S-Man, about that whole presidency thing, like we go over to statistics, I say we go up to where Truman was before the Depression, the Great Depression.
Truman wasn't president until it was because FDR was
II.
Yeah. He was around the end of World War II. He assumed the presidency due to the death of Roosevelt, and he presided over near the end of World War II and the droppings of the bombs onto Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I'm talking about we should go a little bit further back to Wilson or.
I mean, the reason I would go with
Wilson
with
Coolidge?
but yeah, that could work. So we also go over like their foreign policies because Ham keeps saying that every post World War II president, like Eisenhower to now, if the Nuremberg laws were applied, they would be executed under those laws. They would be hanged. And on the foreign policies of some of the presidents, I guess you could argue that, like Nixon with the invasion, with the coup in Chile in 1973.
And who is this Ham guy? Cult of Ham.
Oh, he is
ham sandwich that can talk.
Yeah, he is Humane Mind's best friend. They are like they get along really well.
Computer of mine. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, they get along so well.
Yes, man, I love your sarcasm because I know they don't get along.
What are you talking about?
Right.
I am never sarcastic. Like, what are you talking about?
Ham's in love.
Damn right, motherfucker.
Okay.
Cult of Ham.
So
I thought the guy worshipped Ham itself.
No,
That's the name.
all right.
Or
No,
he's-
this is kind
or
of
he-
going back to a previous topic, but so I don't know if you've seen me mouthing and counting. So looking at those two links I sent you, the Wikipedia, the prior to 1900 on their list of serial killers, there's about 105 of those. On the 1900s, or after the 1900s, there are 310 named serial killers, and then there's a full list of the serial killers we never found out who they were. So that's what I'm talking about, and I know that's, again, you have to take in consideration documentation and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the fact that everything we have is showing in the last 100 years what. Okay, so even if you account for that, let's say only 10% of the serial killers throughout history have been actually documented prior to 1900. That still means that we've had a third of that within the past 100 years as opposed to the last 6,000 years. Or, 6,000-ish.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Okay, but
All right, I'm gonna have to go, guys. But you guys have fun, and I hope you guys have a good night. And as always, Google it is a salty bitch. Till next time.
Hey, Humane Mind, you want me to do a stream if you want to
360 no
continue?
scope.
Sorry, what?
Timothy.
Are you still going?
Yeah, I'm still going on my side. So even though he's off air on his end, I'm using OBS. So, but I do think we kind of need to wrap this up. And I was
Wait,
hoping
can
to
the
get
stream
into
close out, though,
the
or-
censorship issue with talking about the same kind of subject. But I think I seriously think all of these are kind of tied together and related. Although I'm not sure exactly how. It seems.
You
Maybe
really
it's
have
just.
to-
Hmm?
May I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Timothy. It's actually like there could be a really good theory for this, but you have to like bring a really good explanation for it.
Yeah, I don't know what that explanation is. This
It
is
could
something...
be just a matter of record keeping because
But
in the old days, there's nobody like documenting murders in 13th century Persia or whatever.
But like I said, even if we've only got 10% of those documented, do you think that it's less? That 10% is probably inaccurate? Maybe it should be closer to like 1% or something, or.
I would say like maybe 90% of that might be accurate, depending on how they did the documents.
No, I mean, so we're saying the number of serial killers that have been in human history, how many of them prior to 1900 do you think we have documentation of? So, because you can... The idea is we've only got documentation of a small sample of that. But how small is that sample? And I know it's kind of...
It's a very small sample, like of the whole. Okay, let's start. You will never have documentation of serial killers before there was writing. So, okay, you can discount everything from 6,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, you can. Yeah. Okay, so then you would look at it. Is there like Sumerian references to serial killers?
I mean, do your research.
Yeah, yeah. This
could be.
something.
This is an interesting research subject. I think you sort of might underestimate how closely documented things are today, compared to the past. But if you really wanted to look into serial killers, start from history.
The other thing is you also have to consider. You also have to consider population explosion.
Sorry.
Right. That's another thing that's going to be a factor in this is population explosion. Because prior to like about 1,000 years ago, the population of the planet was less than 1 billion, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the 19th century, we suddenly have a population explosion. So every sort of crazy serial killer, they're gonna appear more.
So is it the fact that there's more people, that there's more serial killers, or is it the fact, or are we seeing a per capita increase in serial killers? That's what I'm trying to. I don't know.
You're gonna have to calculate if there's a proportional increase in serial killers.
I think there is, but I'd have to document.
You think
and prove
there
that,
is, but it's not.
I have to actually prove that, but that's.
So actually, I'm actually sort of interested in this hypothesis of yours. Collect empirical evidence and come back.
Yeah.
I mean,
this is very interesting.
I'll grant you that, Timothy.
Yeah, well, if I have time to get around to it.
If you're gonna
as somebody else do this for who can I pay to do this for me?
I would be able to do it, but I wouldn't charge for it, and I don't know if I would get the right data because I'm not perfect.
I have better things to do.
I think this is something I would want to do myself, but
do it.
I might be onto something here.
Okay, if you come and you reject the null hypothesis, there is no increase in serial killers proportionally or whatever, then we just know that.
Yeah.
Then,
well, here's the other thing. We've seen an increase in the last decade of the amount of serial killers and all that sort of thing than in the past 100 years. Like if you look at the time frames, we're seeing an increase even in the past 100 years or 10 years as opposed to the past 100 years. So we are seeing this kind of exponential increase in the number of people who are killing either in mass or on serial killer sprees. That seems.
There's a stupid theory that it's because we don't have much time on our hands to do it anymore. I think that's a stupid not that you're saying that or anything.
No,
but I found a theory towards that we don't have time anymore to kill people as much. I've actually
no. We're seeing an increase right now. That's what I'm saying. We're seeing an overall reduction in crime.
Oh no, I know.
But we're seeing an increase in the number of people who are doing I don't know how else to phrase this because mass killings are different than serial killing, but it's still the same kind of mental state you would have to be in where you're saying, okay, I'm definitely going to end lives. But we're seeing an overall reduction in crime, and that's because that includes people who like the spur of the moment and crimes of passion, or crime usually it's domestic violence, or it's if you're talking about gang violence and that sort of thing. But overall, those numbers are going down. However.
Involuntary manslaughter also.
Yeah. However, the number of cases of mass killings, terrorists would be included in this, and people who are going on killing sprees, we're seeing an increase in that, which, even though the overall numbers are going down, that particular category is expanding. And granted, a huge portion of that is the increase in terrorism. Well, the other thing that you have to consider is even though this is going on, your odds of actually being a victim of a mass shooting or victim of a serial killer or victim of a terrorist event, even if you include all three of those together, you're still more likely to get struck by lightning twice while winning the lottery. I think that's the how that statistic works out, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but I do know it's really, really not realistic to be afraid of a terrorist or a serial killer killing you. It might be just being struck by lightning while winning the lottery or something like that.
And a plane falling on your head.
Yeah, it is. It seems like the probability is not in your favor if you're like, oh, I'm going to die of a terrorist attack. You're like, there are 7 billion people, and of that 7 billion people, 100 It's in the hundreds.
Actually,
My thing is with all this gun regulation, everybody, when something bad happens, everybody gets that Chicken Little mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you get what I mean, the sky is falling.
Yeah, it's the end of the world. We got to do something now and immediate, and that seems to be a problem. It's like if you can't, if a solution doesn't work when a tragedy hasn't happened, why would a tragedy happening suddenly make it the logical thing to do?
Yeah.
That's
When I heard about March for March, I thought, okay, you're doing activism, which I guess is okay, good if, like, you're showing that you can, like, do public speeches and maybe people will hire you for that. But I don't see it's not going to change anything besides maybe a job, because people might be impressed by it, depending on how you do it. So we'll say they are the kids know how to speak, but I don't agree with their message.
all right.
You know.
Well, this has gone. Let's see, I started this or my end of the stream around 7:30, so this has gone on almost 2 hours on my end.
That seems perfect.
Can I have a last word?
Yeah. I don't really have any last words. Hopefully people paid attention or listening to this and kind of like, huh. Hopefully I made you think. I mean, I don't know. This is just stuff that's been interesting to me.
I think you're going to have to collect some evidence.
Yeah.
It wasn't very convincing, but
I get you.
I think it might be true, but it's sort of when you're dealing with historical sources, it's like you're dealing with stuff from like a century ago or two centuries ago.
So what I'd have to do is I'd have to break this down into different categories. So I'd have to break this down into.
It's like it's not comparable, really. I
understand. So you'd have to have once writing it, so you can't actually calculate anything before written history. So you'd have to start at written history, which is about 6,000-ish years ago. So from written history up until the printing press, and then the printing press, you have to.
That's such a long time.
Yeah, it's such a long period of time. Yeah, because that's because as you go through these stages, the documentation becomes more and more accurate. So you'd have to kind of build a scale of prior to the printing press, historical documents not too reliable, and we probably have a very, very insignificant portion of the actual incidents that occurred. After the printing press, the amount of those being tracked and records kept of it probably a little significantly higher. Prior, after 19-ish hundreds, that goes up, and then with the adoption of the computer and the internet, well, then that goes even higher, because now we've got ways of tracking every little thing that people do. So once I've got those time frames broken down, and I can compare them, we can get a little bit better estimation of, because once the printing press is out there, I may be able to ballpark an estimation of how many we think might have been in existence at those particular or during those periods of time, and see if are we seeing something consistent, or are we seeing an increase? And again, all of that would be pretty. It would be
actually, I think I must admit that I think your hypothesis that there is in like the few certain centuries there has been an increase in like serial killers. I think that is an interesting hypothesis, but I think you won't even be able to find like convincing data to even like try to prove that point. I'm doubtful, but I would suggest
we could
try. I would be interested in that. Seriously,
I think if we just focus on the last 100 years and we start tracking by decade, and maybe there's a pattern there. I don't know.
Yeah. So start,
because that's something we would have fairly accurate records on the last 100 years.
So start putting those numbers into SPSS.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually stimulating my synapses in my brain. Actually,
dude, you don't have to mask it or use innuendos. We know you're talking about you're jerking it while you're listening to us speak.
No. I'm actually intrigued by this.
Well, that's the point of these streams. Is that hopefully there was a couple jokes in there and you made you laugh, but the main thing is if it made you think about something maybe you hadn't thought about before.
Yeah. I will admit that's what my streams are lacking. I've been trying to do it with Random Discussions podcasts, is do thought-provoking topics like War Corps, comments on teachers' pay, like thought-provoking stuff. I've been trying to do it separate from Just Alive because I see that as more of just random stuff.
Yeah, and that's something I try to do with my channel in general, is I didn't want to repeat what I'm hearing other people make in their videos and just be like, oh, hey, all of those same points just with somebody else saying them. I didn't want to be that carbon copy type thing.
You don't regurgitate everything. You actually have more. You take a more intelligent approach to things, which I do enjoy a lot. I hate.
What I mean is I come up with it on the fly of what I want to talk about usually.
Yeah, sometimes I do that. I'm not going to say I try to prepare, but lately I haven't been doing that on these